Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you. And we're on the second in our series of well-being. We're on a well-being journey. And this week it's physical well-being. So let's get physical, in the words of that famous song by Olivia Newton-John. I did say to Claire, maybe we could play that and just invite everyone to come in lycra this morning. And Claire reminded me we had guests. And church is weird enough, isn't it? I'm sorry if you've got now a mental image that you can't get rid of for the day. Who's ever said, my body is a temple? My body is a temple. I've said that, ironically, indulging in one more bag of crisps or that second greasy but oh so lovely takeaway of the week. Or shaking the last drops from the wine bottle, or rather than going to bed, just staying on the sofa where I've been all night to watch another episode of, well, what's your favourite? Midsummer Murders? Game of Thrones, or Love Island perhaps? Whatever yours is. Not that I'm condemning any of those things. Though we could make a case for Love Island, couldn't we? But my body is a temple, we say, when actually that's the last thing we really think, and that's not how we're treating it. And if we're honest, most of us aren't happy with how we look after ourselves, or we're self-critical or dissatisfied in some way with our physical bodies. And everyone's got bits, haven't they, that they wish were different. So why don't you just turn to the person next to you and just show them... No, don't. No, we're not going to do that. Claire's just... But the origins of that phrase, my body is a temple, and what it means is actually pretty stunning. And a lot of you all know it has its origins in the Bible, in the letter that St. Paul wrote to a church in a city called Corinth. And it was one of the new Christian churches in the first century. And Paul wrote this to them. He said, Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You're not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. Your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you. Now, at that time, comparing something to the Jewish temple in first century Israel meant something quite incredible, quite astonishing. Because for centuries, millennia even, the Jewish people had understood the temple to be the ultimate symbol of God's love and his desire to be with his people. But also a place where God had chosen to be particularly and powerfully present. Not that they thought God was restricted to a box or a building. Of course he's not. But the temple was the place where the presence of God and his love for his people and the world was experienced most deeply and fully. Another way of looking at this idea of temple is this is the place where heaven meets earth. This is the place where the loving rule and care of God meets our human lives and everything else that God created. All of that in the idea of temple is probably what Paul had in mind, because he was a Jew, when he wrote to the church that was struggling with, how do we live well? It was struggling and asking the question, how do we live well? You see, they had this perspective, and it's a perspective that still exists in places today, that the body was something that's quite separate from the person or the soul, the spirit. And so that it doesn't really matter what we do with our bodies, because it's our spirit or our soul that matters. And Paul says, no, that's not how human beings are made. That's not how they work, because the biblical understanding of a person, and actually a modern scientific understanding of a person, is one of a whole integrated soul or person, human being. We are both ensouled bodies and embodied souls, and there's no division or split between the two. And so if God lives in us as a temple, that means he inhabits and loves and supports our physical, fleshy bodies just as much as he inhabits our hearts or our minds or our spirit, whatever you want to call it. See, our bodies are not separate things that we have, but part of our very self that is loved and cherished by God. They are the place, the temple, where he chooses to be. Isn't that amazing? When you stop and think about it, that this body, that your body is the place where God would choose to come and stay. Kind of makes you want to whiz the vacuum round and put some bleach down the toilet, doesn't it, when someone important comes to stay? But it's a vital point that there's no division in the human being between body and soul, and yet that way of thinking, that our body is something that we have rather than part of who we are, keeps returning. Certain philosophies and mindsets, and particularly in an increasingly digital, disembodied world. A tendency to see our physical selves as something that's distinct from who we are as a person. And this can lead to all sorts of fracturing and dysfunctional relationships with our bodies and our physical well-being. And it can be, not always, a contributory factor to forms of self-harm or self-abuse, such as excessively working our bodies too hard. Those who are addicted to exercise. People who suffer from body dysmorphia, from food and drink addictions, eating disorders where the body can be perceived as disconnected or even sometimes a prison, something that we hate, or a possession that we need to take control of. And there'll be people here this morning who've experienced one or more of those. But the truth is that our physical bodies are wonderfully made. Fearfully and wonderfully made, says Psalm 139. They're beautiful, sacred places, the place where heaven and earth might overlap. And we see this supremely in Jesus Christ, the person in whom God has united himself with humanity. See, Jesus, with a human body, is the place where heaven meets earth, the place where God meets us. And even more than this, in Jesus, the human body, and so our human bodies too, become the place where God's love is revealed, understood, and experienced by others. Just as Jesus' body was, our bodies are sacred spaces where God lives. Through how we use them and look after them, might be places where others encounter the love of God. Pope John Paul, in his theology of the body, which I haven't read in full because it took him years to write it, says this, that the body and it alone is capable of making visible what is invisible, the spiritual and the divine. It, the body, was created to transfer into the visible reality of the world the mystery hidden since time immemorial in God. And this is how the Jewish and the Christian perspective differs from maybe some contemporary views of well-being, where health and vitality is all about kind of self-glorification or making ourselves lovable or attractive. You see, in the Christian perspective, bodies are not something we do with as we please for our own pleasure or self-esteem, but our bodies, like Christ's body, are the sacred place that God inhabits, and the sacred place where the invisible God might be made visible to the world, so that others might meet him in and through us. So our bodies are just our physical, ordinary selves, are special, they matter, they're worth looking after. And coming back to our reading from Kings about Elijah, see, in Elijah's life, he's running from his enemies. He's been living in the way God has asked him to live, which he was something of a kind of rebellious activist. He was calling out injustice. He was confronting greedy, corrupt leaders who were taking their nation in the wrong direction, who were stealing the resources and essentials of life from ordinary people. That's what he was doing, and confronting that sort of thing then as now is a tough place to be. And so we find Elijah when he's just reached the end. He's reached the end of himself. He's burned out. He's exhausted. Maybe he's even depressed. He says, I just want to die. He can't go on. He's spent and he feels worthless. And I love how God comes to him, and he doesn't diagnose some kind of spiritual malaise or say there's something wrong with you mentally, Elijah. And he doesn't offload some heavy theological message or a prophecy or a teaching. But the God of the universe looks at Elijah and says, you need some sleep, my friend. You need some sleep. And he touches him with an angel and offers him food and drink. So when we see God tending to Elijah in this way, not just once, but remember twice in the story that Elijah is touched and giving something to eat and drink. This isn't God just, he could have done anything, right? He could have just clicked his fingers and Elijah would have been up. But this isn't God just refueling Elijah like he's some sort of tool. It's an act of love and compassion for Elijah as the whole person. It's an interest and a deep knowledge and understanding and care about what he was feeling and what state he was in. And God knows the state that you're in too. It tells us that it's okay, it's good, and it's right to look after our bodies, that our well-being is important to our God. And in the light of what we've been thinking about in Paul's letter, it's a sacred and a holy thing when we stop and slow down and take care of our bodies to eat, drink, sleep, and rest. And Elijah's unable to get on with being the person God made him to be until he gets some rest, food, and sleep. It's not an attitude problem that he has. It's not a sin thing or a lack of faith or understanding. He just needs some food and sleep. And we need to learn from that. When we're thinking about how we cope with life, when we're struggling, maybe struggling with our relationship with God, with our faith and our trust in the call he's put on our lives like Elijah was. When we think maybe it's all been a mistake, we can often think it's some disembodied spiritual thing going on or a mental thing. But actually maybe it's something that needs to change physically. Let's take sleep. Who gets enough sleep? Whoa, that is nobody. Sleep research has linked poor sleep to deficits in emotional processing and reduced positive social behaviours. And other studies I was reading this week have shown that inadequate sleep results in decreased activity in the parts of our brains where we do empathy, where we understand each other, where we kind of get other people's perspective and points of view and experience. Recent research has also shown that a lack of sleep reduces our willingness to help others, even to the extent that tired people donate less money to good causes. We are integrated persons, right? This body is for loving others, and the reason we don't do that isn't some kind of spiritual thing. It's often because we're just physically depleted. Growing spiritual fruit like goodness and kindness isn't just a matter of belief and what we think, but of getting enough sleep. If you're not rested, God's not going to be working through you quite so well. So Elijah needed sleep for his own health and well-being. God cared. But if he didn't get enough sleep, he might have just been this tired, cranky old guy who was so much less ready to engage with what God was asking him and to help the people who needed him. You see, if worship in its broadest sense is our offering, not just of our minds, our thoughts, our spirit, but our physical selves. Why would we offer God something that we've neglected? A gift that we haven't looked after, the bodies that aren't as ready, rested and healthy as they can be. See, being well rested and nourished might be the very thing we need to do to worship and to say yes to God. Because being human, living the way that God intended, to love God and to love others, is to make sure that we're getting the right sleep, diet, and we're exercising our bodies. And sometimes, God will restore us supernaturally, just like that, with gifts of sleep and healing. But quite often his restoration comes to us through other bodies, doesn't it? Through other people, through the touch of others on our lives, doctors, physios, other experts. So we do need to listen to the other people, the other bodies that God inhabits and comes to us through. And as we were planning this series, or Claire planned this series along with my wife Sally, she said, do get Sally involved in this to talk about her experience. For those of you who don't know, Sally's a dietitian with a National Health Service and also a health coach. So I'm going to invite Sally to come up a bit now. And Claire encouraged me several times to get Sally involved because she wanted someone who knows what they're talking about to talk to you this morning. She also wanted someone who looks as though they walk the talk rather than me, I suspect. I'm putting words in Claire's mouth. Basically, you don't want a hypocrite telling you how to be healthy, do you? So we're going to talk to Sally about that now. So Sally, sleep, first of all. We read today about how one of Elijah's needs was to get some sleep. So what would have been happening kind of to him, in him, while he was sleeping, and why was that important?
Okay, well, sleep, I was listening to something yesterday, is described as the Swiss Army knife of health. I don't think there's a single ailment that getting more sleep, there isn't a tool that sleep won't kind of provide for that ailment. Sleep is phenomenal. When we sleep, incredible stuff happens. It's not a surprise that when we've had a good night's sleep, we wake up and we feel refreshed and restored, and we can cope with more going on in our lives. Sleep is phenomenal. I often liken it when we go to sleep. If you think about like a busy office block during the day, loads of activities going on, people are working, they're creating mess, they're creating debris, and at night everyone leaves and it goes quiet. And when we go to sleep, it's a bit like that. The activity levels calm down. And like the cleaners can go in and clear up and make it all ready to thrive and to be ready for people to come in and work the next day. And it's a bit like that happens in our bodies overnight when we go to sleep. We're not just resting, phenomenal processes happen and we don't understand them all properly. But I said like about the cleaners going in, and essentially when we go to sleep, our immune system is activated. We can fight off infection better, and we have something called natural killer cells that go around our body and kind of mop up precancerous cells. So if we're not getting enough sleep, we're putting our body at increased risk of infection, increased risk of cancer. There are lots of hormonal changes that happen at night as well. When we sleep and we rest, our heart rate goes down, our stress levels come down, and that has an impact on things like our blood sugar levels and our appetite. And so actually we need to sleep well to be able to lots of people are trying to lose weight, but unless you're sleeping well, your appetite regulation is out of whack. We know when we're tired we want to eat more. So, and actually as well when we sleep, not just our physical health but our emotional health. I think sleep is like a sort of first aid kit for our emotional health. So masses of stuff that goes on when we sleep. Great, thank you.
And what simple steps can we take? Nobody, I think, put their hand up did we get enough sleep? So what simple steps can we take to get more, better sleep?
Yeah, well, there are a few kind of simple things that you can do that just make it easier to get more sleep. I know as parents with young children, we try and get kids into a routine, don't we, when it comes to sleep? And yet somehow, as we grow older, we don't think that's so important for us. But actually getting into a regular routine where you go to bed and you wake up at the same time, sort of roughly every day, really helps. So our bodies just thrive on rhythm and routine. So I'd suggest that, and try to create an opportunity for at least 7 hours sleep a night. That seems to be this key number. So that's quite important. And also watch what you expose yourself to before you get into bed. So caffeine is a stimulant. Try not to have that after midday if possible. It stays in our system a lot. Alcohol is a sedative, and some people think, I'll have a drink, that will help me get to sleep. But actually, sedation isn't the same as sleep. It's not the same quality sleep that we get. So yes, have a drink, but try not to have masses. Maybe don't eat too late as well, that raises our heart rate. And don't expose yourself to too much blue or bright light, blue light or bright light. That often comes out of devices that we look at. And that fools our mind into thinking it's daylight. So we don't produce melatonin, which is a hormone that helps us sleep. So if you're exposing yourself looking at lots of devices, that doesn't help. And then just think about the environment that you try to sleep in. You actually want the environment to be cool. Apparently 18 degrees is the ideal temperature. I don't always have control over that in the summer, but you want it to be dark, as I just said about the importance of light. And actually you want it to be sort of calm and quiet. Our beds should be where we sleep. They are not a cinema, they are not an office, they are not a cafe, and yet that's what people kind of use them for. So those are just a few really simple tips that might help.
Thank you. And then food and drink. We all know that diet matters in principle. So my question is it true that you are what you eat?
Okay, well, yes and no, I guess, would be my answer to that. Clearly, if I eat banana, I am not a banana. But fortunately, the nutrients that are in the foods that we eat do influence how our body functions. They go on to make up the cells of our body, and they go on to affect the functioning of our body. It's no surprise that we call certain substances vitamins. They are vital to our health, and without them, we can't function properly. There are lots of biochemical processes that happen in our bodies, and if there are certain nutrients missing, those processes just can't happen, and so we can't function optimally.
Okay, so there must be a perfect diet then, right? What's the perfect diet? Everyone wants to know.
If I had the answer to that, I think I'd be a millionaire, wouldn't I? But I don't think there is a perfect diet. That oversimplifies things. And for a number of people, they have to follow certain diets because of conditions that they have. But I think there are a few maybe overarching principles that help. God designed us to eat whole, real foods. And we wonder why we struggle when people are increasingly eating a lot of very processed foods, things that have been manufactured and have lots of cheap fats and a lot of sugar added and are actually quite devoid in nutrients. We wonder why our bodies can't function properly when they were designed for whole, real foods. And some people think, oh, but that sounds like a lot of work, that sounds very expensive. Actually, it doesn't need to be. Fruit and veg that are frozen are pretty much as good sometimes as fresh ones. You can use lots of pulses and things like that. So, yeah, whole, real food would be one thing. Another thing would actually be to shift the perspective, maybe away from thinking about quantity always around food. So many people are obsessed about wanting to lose weight and looking at calories, but often then we lose sight of the quality of what we eat, and that's a really important thing to bear in mind. We want foods that are nutrient dense, that actually nourish our bodies, so it's worth thinking about that sort of element of nourishment. Another thing is to think about a plant slant in your diet. We all probably have heard that eat 5 a day, and I think that's a helpful thing to think about. But actually, and ideally more vegetables than fruit because of sugar. But think about one helpful description I find is trying to eat a rainbow. Look to eat different colours of fruits and vegetables and plant-based foods because those all provide different nutrients. And so,
like in opal fruits?
No, not in opal fruits. That is not one of your 5 a day. A little bit more education may be needed here. But yeah, that can be a helpful thing. So I've thought about processed, about quality, about plants. And actually another simple thing that you can do, as we're going into winter, won't be having as much sun. Our bodies make vitamin D from sunlight. Over the winter months, it's actually advisable to take a vitamin D supplement. So if you don't do that, I would actually encourage that. It's either 10 micrograms or 400 international units, they would usually say on the packet. But that's really important for our immunity as well as bone health.
Thank you. Finally then, on movement and exercise, do I really have to do 10,000 steps a day?
I think it's useful to have goals, isn't it? And this 10,000 thing has come about and everyone's got their watches and they try and aim for their 10,000 or whatever steps it is. But actually, I think rather than always focusing on exercise, I often talk to people about movement. And I think it's just really important that whatever your baseline level is, you maybe try to move more. And it doesn't have to be steps. Not everyone can walk, if we just focus on steps. But it's about moving our bodies, because we know our bodies, again, the way God designed us, we thrive when we do the things that we're meant to, when we sleep, when we eat well, when we move. Our bodies are designed to move. And it has a huge impact on cardiovascular health, on our bone health, on our muscle mass, which, will decrease as we get older if we don't look after them, on our brain function. So I would just say, try and move more. Try to vary what you do, vary the intensity of what you do, because that all helps. And also try to do something that you enjoy. Set yourself small goals. You're not going to be able to go out and run a marathon tomorrow. And actually just look for ways. We're becoming increasingly sedentary, often in the way people work. Just look for opportunities to move in the day, sort of outside of that constant thought you've got to go out and, go to the gym and sort of cane yourself in the gym. Just go and move, get out, go for a walk, those kind of things. Do it with somebody else, do something that you enjoy. I think they would be a few key tips.
Thank you, Sally. Do grab Sally afterwards if you wanted to talk about any of those things. Sleep, food, movement, these are all so important that our vicar, Andy Tufnell, said that when he next preaches, it's okay to have your usual 40 winks, completely guilt-free. You can bring snacks, and if you feel the need to walk out halfway through, just to get some movement, that's absolutely fine. He didn't say any of those things, I'm making it up. We're actually going to come to a bit of a close, and just offer us a time to pray, to kind of meditate on these things, and if you want to offer them to God, who is here, who is very much here. So I'm going to just offer a couple of minutes of quiet, I think, for us to pray about those things. And if you sense God doing something in you, or you want to talk about them further and pray about them further, then there'll be some people. It's up here at the front at the end of the service, Claire and myself and probably one or two others, and we'd love to pray through these things with you. But let's just be quiet now, and you may find it helpful to close your eyes and to sit comfortably. And I'm just going to sort of to speak and to pray. God says of our bodies, this is where I choose to live in you and through you. So will you let God help you to see your body as a part of you that he could not love anymore? He adores the whole of you. Will you let God help you see your body as the gift and the sacred place it is? It may not be perfect in the world's eyes, but it's a perfect home for God. And he's here to help us to cherish and to look after it, to feed it well, to rest and to move, and to restore it where it's broken. And as I was preparing for today, I just was prompted to say that if you're trying to control your body in some way in order to feel loved or lovable or worthy, and God's desire is that you know that you, the whole you, as you are wonderfully made and breathtakingly stunning in God's eyes. And the faith, the gift from God, is to trust unreservedly that you're loved by him, so that you can let go of every false way of obtaining love. Maybe there are those who feel disconnected from their physical selves, their physical bodies. Maybe even some who are abusing their bodies or harming them in some way. Food, alcohol, or other substances. Thank you, Lord, that you're a God who heals and restores, and we offer you ourselves this morning, our disconnectedness, our feelings about ourselves, our physical selves, our desires to be healthier, because we know it's the right thing to do. And we say, come and heal us and restore us. Thank you that you can reach out and touch our lives as you reached out and touched Elijah. Amen.